Welcome to the second episode of our new series, Let's Talk Careers. In this episode, a University of Manchester student, an industry professional and myself will be discussing our second topic, neurodiversity. We will be sharing our experiences of being neurodiverse in relation to job applications and employment within the workspace. I'm Cathy Bradley. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the interim lead EDI partner at the University of Manchester, and I'm also a woman who has a disability. So I have ankylosing spondylitis, so I use a wheelchair on campus. I'm going to introduce my two guests today. So, Charlie Gill, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Charlie. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a final year BSc physics student at the University of Manchester, and I'm autistic and I have ADHD.
Thanks, Charlie. And Lorna Culpin, and can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lorna Culpin. My pronouns are she, her. I work for EY in their Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence. I've worked in D&I based roles for a number of years now, so whilst I have no protected characteristics, very much here as an ally as well.
Thank you both. So, let's start off with our first question. So, Charlie, thinking about equality, diversity and inclusion before you came to Manchester, did you take it into account when you were looking at universities?
I actually didn't, because I didn't find out I was disabled until I'd started university, but it's definitely something that I consider a lot more now that I know, and with hindsight, had I known, it definitely would have been something that I'd consider at the time.
Fantastic. And what was that process? How was it finding out you were disabled once you joined us?
Everything sort of made a lot of sense once I found out, especially with like autism and ADHD, stuff that I have had all my life, and people have made reference to, but not knowing that that's what it was. And it was interesting, like, going to the Disability Advisory Service for the first time, and getting support from them and from my department, and understanding why certain things were hard for me, and what could be put in place to make things easier for me. And it made me realise that I'm capable of a lot more than I thought I was capable of once I was in the correct environment.
Fantastic. So you got all your reasonable adjustments sorted out and you were able to thrive here at Manchester. And I know Charlie has just referenced our Disability Advisory Support Service, and this is a service that we have at Manchester. It's an incredible service for both staff and students that enables all of us with disabilities to get assistance with access to work and reasonable adjustments and all of those things that we need to allow us to thrive at the university. And you had a really good experience with DAS, didn't you?
Yeah, DAS have been really supportive. I've needed to sort of see them every year as the things that in my degree have changed, and they've been really helpful with liaising with my department, getting accommodations in that the department weren't necessarily sure were available, but DAS were really good with supporting me in that process. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Charlie. So, Charlie, you've just come to the end of your degree, haven't you?
Yes,
and are about to graduate. So what were your fears about graduating and going into the world of work?
I think I was quite scared because I know that there's some jobs that are definitely going to be harder for me, and jobs that maybe aren't going to be great for me, or jobs that I should do. Like, I was concerned about taking any jobs in sort of like catering or retail, like sort of jobs that a lot of people do as students or just coming out of being a student, because I can't deal with the level of sort of like socialising and communicating that comes with that. And they can be in quite loud, overwhelming, busy environments. So I knew I was going to need something more like office-based. But again, sometimes I can struggle with really bright lights or like the way people communicate if it's slightly vague or if I'm not sure what people mean. And I was quite worried about that. So that was a lot of things I had to take into consideration.
Fantastic. Thanks, Charlie. Lorna, I know at EY you have this amazing neurodiversity centre of excellence. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that helps people who are in Charlie's position, come into EY?
Definitely. So firstly, just to say, centre is such a misleading word. It sounds like it's a really exciting place on campus. It's a bank of desks.
Yeah.
It's a bank of desks that are positioned in a in a quieter area of the office, but it is just a bank of desks. But what we can do on top of that is really think about everything else that gets wrapped around that office job. So like Charlie was talking about, what are the expectations? Being as clear as we can be what we need somebody to be able to do before they come to EY, where we can upskill them, what the boundaries of those expectations are. Any of these big firms, not just EY, but any of these big employers you will see about on campus, there's such a range of things. And if employers are very, very clear about that, it really helps our neurodivergent colleagues coming in to understand, okay, I find socialising a bit of a struggle. That's okay. I know that I'm going to have to go to just a few client meetings in my job because it's a very, very tech-based job. Whereas if you are somebody working in our reception team, it's important that they know that it's a very interactive job. We try and put as many adjustments in place, and that's the beauty of working somewhere like EY. We have a huge firm that we've got loads of access to, not only working with established organisations that can support us with adjustments, but being able to think about huge things from technology adjustments. So a lot of our neurodivergent colleagues really benefit from noise cancelling headphones so that they can just block out some of that chatter in the background. Light glasses that cut out some of the really bright lights in the office. We've been able to do that, but most of the adjustments, the ones that are most impactful, are free, and it's so easy. And that's been about conversations. So I can remember how hard it was graduating, even though it feels like a while ago now. But it's so important to have those conversations, even if you don't feel fully ready to disclose. Maybe you're having them with your manager and just saying, I sometimes struggle. What can I do if I find reading large volumes of text difficult? And they can talk you through those as well.
So how do you find the neurotypical employees react to you trying to implement those adjustments, trying to put a neurodivergent person into a role? Do you get challenged sometimes, or do you find that you've now got a culture where it's beneficial for everybody?
It's definitely a culture where it's beneficial for everyone. We've done a lot of work promoting the fact that neuro inclusion benefits everyone. So an example would be, I'm fairly sure from all of my work I'm neurotypical. I've got nothing to suggest otherwise, but I find timing really stressful. If people run over, I am incredibly stressed by that. I really like to be on time. And by always setting agendas before meetings to help our colleagues who find things that are surprising really difficult, I'm more relaxed. I can see the agenda, and they are more relaxed. There was a lot of curiosity to begin with, and I think a lot of that comes from people wanting to do the right thing. I think people felt that they'd almost be like tripping over themselves trying to put adjustments in place. But actually, they've realised for most of our colleagues, it's only a couple of things that make a really big difference. And that benefits the whole team that you work in, whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, and particularly those colleagues who might not know, who might not have been diagnosed, or who might be diagnosed but just not ready to share that yet. So I think it's been a really positive step.
That's amazing to hear, because we know, don't we, that's not always the case, unfortunately. When you do go into the world of work, and so it's really fantastic that EY are like that. That's wonderful. So Lorna, one of the things, obviously, that you must do in your job is help people find out about their rights. So how do workplaces do this? Because things are very different, aren't they, from when you're a student to when you're going into the world of work?
They really are. And it's quite hard when that supportive bubble is taken away. The biggest advice I could give someone, which I'm aware is a very big ask, but is to disclose as early as you can. Companies want to do the right thing, and they want to try, and it's when they don't know what they're dealing with that can be the hardest thing. Ask the question, what might feel like a really difficult thing to make an adjustment for, actually for an employer is probably really easy. There are then a number of different things you can look at. If you're comfortable with a lot of text, the Equalities Act is a great place to start. You can find that online. There will always be a summary. companies' ED&I policies, knowing what they're telling other people about. You know, if a company's really vocal, they've got quite a big public presence, a lot online, you can probably be quite confident in what they're going to be doing. And then just speaking to someone in the recruitment team, you know, if it's a matter of, you know, can you tell me what the accessibility looks like? Am I able to get in using my wheelchair? What are the toilets? What are the steps like? They are all really, really good starting places. And then I think if you need that extra level of confidence, or you have some questions, maybe you're working for a smaller business that doesn't have as much access, you know, to these wide ranging policies. Somewhere like Access to Work is a really good place to start, and who can help navigate what is quite often a minefield of accessibility as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Charlie, have you got anything sort of from the student point of view about that, you know, finding out about your rights and things like that?
I mean, from my perspective, for me, I used to, in my gap year, work for a company called In Space Missions, and I found that accommodations that I didn't really need to ask for, because they were sort of more like a company culture. So things like, you know, everyone didn't have to wear like suits and stuff all day. It was a lot more casual, and it meant that I could pick clothes that I was comfortable in. And they had like a very like flexible working policy, so people worked from home when they could. And Lorna's right that putting things in place help everybody. And for me, that helps with things like disclosing. Like if I go to apply to a company and I see on their website that they've thought about accessibility, and they've got information up about accessibility, and if their recruitment processes are accessible, and I can tell they've thought about the needs of people like me, I'm much more likely to disclose early on and ask for the adjustments that I need, because I can see that there's awareness there, and that people are likely to understand where I'm coming from and understand what I need and work with me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. You look on somebody's website, and if you can see everything, you know, you trust them a little bit more before you even start, don't you? And you're more likely to share your disability with them. Yeah, definitely. And you know what? I mean, from my experience as well, is remembering that the offer an interview scheme. You know, through Disability Confident, and I don't think a lot of students realise that they can do that. You know, that as long as they meet the specified, you know, the desired criteria, or the required criteria of the job, they can say, I'm disabled, I would like to be considered under the offer and interview scheme, which means that you get an interview, actually get your foot in the door to actually get an interview for the job. And I don't think I've had a single job interview that hasn't been through the offer and interview scheme. I
really like that scheme, because I think it really accounts for difficulties that we might have in the written application process, or like any pre-interview tests or anything like that can be a bit harder for us, and it might mean that we maybe don't quite meet the cut-off threshold for whatever you're interviewing, but that doesn't mean that we're not good people to employ. And I know that I often do much better at interview than I necessarily do in the written application, and it gives us a chance.
Yeah, I think that's really important for a lot of students and graduates to know about, you know, to give them that opportunity to get through the door.
And to add, on the flip side, when you do get through the door, about not being afraid to ask for things like interview questions in advance. Not everyone will advertise they're going to do it, because it might not be their standard practice, or they haven't quite updated the website yet. But nearly most places now will do that, even if there has to be a hidden element. You know, if thinking on your feet and problem solving is important, they might hold back a couple of questions, but go out and ask, because that can give you that time, particularly if you have trouble with processing and thinking on the spot. Quite a lot of places will give you them 24, 48 hours in advance. Yeah. And that can be a huge benefit as well. Yeah,
really brings it back up to that level playing field that actually we should all have, shouldn't we, to thrive.
That's one of the biggest things that I need as an interview accommodation. And I recently went for an interview at the Disability Advisory Service, and they offered half an hour. I could turn up half an hour in advance and get the interview questions, and that was standard for everybody. But they just put me in a little room, and I could write the answers down that I wanted, and getting that extra time to process and think about what I wanted to say was really helpful. And I'm aware that, again, yes, sometimes thinking on your feet is really important, and I'm aware that they might ask follow-up questions based on what I've said, but just being able to get an idea of what you're looking for a little bit in advance and get me thinking about it is really helpful.
Definitely really aids that working memory, doesn't it? It frees you up to be really present in the room. I think the half an hour in advance is such a wonderful thing as well.
Yeah, especially when you're in like a new environment, if you haven't been to the place before, and especially if you're neurodivergent, like autistic, that can be really overwhelming. You don't know where you are, and you're getting used to that, and just it means that, like, whereas neurotypical people might just be able to get on and answer the questions a lot more, our brains are a lot more full of everything else that might be going on, and it just allows us to thrive as well.
The offer is really beautiful as well, because for some people with anxiety, having them in advance might be even worse and create a spiral of, and so just saying you can do this if you want, and if not, turn up. As you said, just completely levels that playing field.
I think that's really important as well, to remember that accommodations aren't the same for everybody, because I know, like, having autism and ADHD, interviews are a weird one for me because I do need stuff in advance so I can prepare, but I do sometimes thrive a bit in the spontaneity of not knowing and the in the moment stuff. And again, like with anxiety or ADHD, you might actually prefer just being on the spot because it's better than being overwhelmed by having it in advance, and it's a really individual thing.
Yeah, definitely. And to say that you have just told us that you actually got the job as well.
Yes, I did. I'm very pleased. I really love this kind of EDI stuff, and it's something that I want to go into. And this is and working at the Disability Advisory Service is a great first step, and I'm really excited to start.
Oh,
well done.
Brilliant. Well done. So, Lorna, I'm going to ask you, how can employers assist in improving all of this for their employees, whether they're graduates or just the standard employees coming in?
Just don't be afraid. Start that conversation. All of ED&I can be scary when you're stood on the outside, and neurodiversity in particular, people can get very passionate about language. There can be quite a lot of heated debates. Just start that conversation. If someone gets language wrong, it's fine. Just correct them, move on. Yeah. I think having that confidence to start in a way is the biggest hurdle that people normally have to go over. I think being more transparent as well with what you do is another great way that employees can further it. If you work somewhere really big, even somewhere like EY where we have a lot of focus on this, I can't know everything that's happening. It's too big and there's too much. And at the same time, employers across the country, they're all doing incredible things. There are brilliant pockets, but it's then finding the time to advertise that as well. And as we've spoken about, being really transparent about what you're doing and how you can advertise that to everybody is so important to attract in that new talent, and is important so we can learn from each other. Like, I've come here today in a EDI but a neurodiversity kind of hat on, but there may be something you're doing at the University of Manchester in terms of race or gender that is amazing, but I just don't know about because things tend to get a little bit bogged down. And I would say as well, we've talked about this a bit, but thinking about that whole business, we've seen that when we've put one of our team members who is neurodivergent into teams, productivity can increase in the whole team by, like, the estimation is 1.2 to 1.4 times more productive. It's so important to have diversity of thought. It's the right thing to do because it is the right, it's important that we all have equal access, but it's so beneficial as well. And I think when organisations start looking at the benefits it brings them as well as it being the right thing to do, it opens up that sphere so much wider.
I think employers sometimes don't necessarily think about as well that as disabled people, I'm sure you'll agree with me, Kathy, we have to think on our feet all day, every day. Access-wise, we are constantly thinking outside the box for how we can do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's our everyday. It makes us great employees because we're used to that kind of thinking, and we have so many skills that people don't even realise just from our lived experiences as disabled people.
Yeah, and I think if, as well, you get it right for disabled employers and you'll find they're actually your most loyal employees because they're too frightened to move on because they don't want to start it all again.
Well, again, we've got globally, so the team that I work in is a global team. They've got a 93% retention rate.
That's incredible.
yeah, I mean, that's incredible for any organisation,
Yeah.
but for teams that work in tech, that's huge. And it's because when, like you said, when you do the right thing,
Yeah.
people are like, great, I don't, this is safe. I'm not moving on.
Yeah.
I'm appreciated.
And it's not just safe, but like when you're autistic, it's familiar, and I don't like constant change and constantly changing where I'm working and who I'm working with and stuff. And it works really well for me if there's somewhere I'm at and they understand me, and is it working for everybody?
I also think we talk quite a lot. One of the biggest adjustments we have is for some of my team, they can get quite overwhelmed when they've been hyper-focusing for too long. So I have an agreement with some of them. They can either start 2 hours late if there's no client meetings and client commitments, or finish 2 hours early. That can seem as an employer quite scary, someone logging off at 2 or 3 o'clock. Just so that so they can rest up. But the reality is, what that means, you might lose 2 hours one day, but you've probably gained 6, 8, like over probably a working day's worth of productivity across the week.
I really love that, because I think neurodivergent people, we hyper focus. We can do a lot more work when we're hyper focusing, but we can't. We don't really work at a constant pace. We hyper-focus on something, and then we need a rest, we need a break, we need to step back. But we're doing the same amount of work overall. It just looks different. There'll be days when we do way more hours and days when we have to do less hours, but it all balances out to the same amount. And that has an extra benefit of one of the hidden barriers, I think, to employers for me is getting to work, going to and from work, because traveling at rush hour, like public transport's really busy, roads are really busy. No matter how I travel, it's going to be busy unless I'm walking. And being able to leave early or arrive early or late means that I can miss that rush hour period and get to work a lot less stressed because it's been a lot less busy. And
so you'll be more productive because you're not stressed. That's a huge benefit. So what do you both think? I'm going to go to you first, Charlie. What do you think are the positives now, having spoken to Lorna and done this, maybe the positives of now looking out into the world of work? Does that feel like a bit more of a positive place, somewhere, that you'll find somewhere that you find to fit into?
It definitely makes me feel a bit better about it, because on a daily basis I'll meet people that are really understanding, I'll meet people that aren't so understanding, and to sit next to someone who works for EY, which is one of the biggest companies in the country, who know and understand this, is really important. And especially when you're going from university to work or education to work, it's a really big shift, especially if you're neurodivergent, because the sort of communication needs on you change. And it took me a little bit of time to get used to even writing. It took me ages to write my CV and write a cover letter for the first time, because I just wasn't used to the way of writing or the type of language that was needed for that. And it's already a difficult transition, and to know that there's companies out there and there's people out there that understand that and that are willing to help us move into that space. And I think that's really important, because I know the employment rate for autistic people in this country is particularly low.
Yeah, it is.
And a lot of us, again, not every disabled person can work, but so many of us would be able to if the correct support was in place, and we have so much to offer.
I think you've got it bob on there, actually, that you know what, we've got as disabled people, we have got so much to give, and a lot of us do want to contribute to society and do want to work and have our own money and not be this group of people that's looked at as always being on benefits all the time, and it's really important, isn't it, that we understand that there are companies like the University of Manchester, like EY, who are extremely supportive of us.
Definitely. And if you're an employer in what's a very challenging market, you should be looking to get these people who might be a bit of an untapped resource that are going to bring so much. On your point about CVs as well, I would really encourage people to make use of the technology changes. Like AI has come along so far. You can't submit an AI-based purely CV and cover letter, but it can really help you. If you don't know where to start, I think it's made such advances for people who particularly maybe struggle with that task initiation as well.
Yeah, I think, and it's useful as well, because if you give it a prompt and you have a look at what it gives back to you, you can see the sort of type of phrasing and maybe borrow a few ways of phrasing information and stuff. And I think that's really helpful, at least initially, to kickstart getting something written. Once I was off, but it did take me quite a few hours and some support from the careers service to.
I think that's really important to say, though, isn't it? Don't rely on AI completely.
Yeah.
You know, it does become very obvious when you're in an interview and you've answered all your questions through AI. But yeah, as a kickstart and giving you an idea, I use it every day.
Same.
I use it now to write alt text for pictures and things like that.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, I only learned about it on Thursday and I've used it all morning today. But yeah, you know, use your AI to kickstart you, and as you said, Lorna, you know, to give you that starting base to produce your CV. Because at the end of the day, that's your first impression, isn't it?
It very much is.
When you go into a job. So yeah.
And I think as well, like adding on to what you were saying about disabled people being like, you know, an untapped resource, but also if you employ disabled people, you get disabled business, you get business from disabled people.
Yeah.
And we are so often excluded from things, but if you include us in jobs and you employ us, then we can also help to make things more accessible for customers, for clients, and for other disabled people coming into jobs, and it just makes everything so much more inclusive and helps all disabled people, really.
Yeah, definitely. What do they say? Something like £73 million per annum is the value of the purple pound as disabled people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money out there, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
You know, that's if you're getting us into jobs and you know, you're giving us that spending ability.
And as you said, there's a lot of rhetoric around, you know, disabled people being on benefits and, you know, using up taxpayer money. But actually, we wouldn't need to if jobs were more accessible to us, if like, money was invested in making transport accessible, in all these things accessible, we wouldn't need to spend that money so much like privately on taxis or on whatever, making it accessible. And we can also contribute in our own ways, and with just not being supported to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a really important comment to that, though, isn't there? That I think a lot of students possibly don't realise that they can carry on having their PIP or their DLA and they can work. You know, it doesn't stop just because you're going into work.
I actually didn't know I was allowed to get PIP as a student, so I don't have it, but it's definitely something I'm looking at applying for now.
So I should explain that PIP is the personal independence payment, and DLA is the old disability living allowance, which some people still get. And
I see a lot of talk in the news about PIP being about being in work, but it's not. It's just an extra payment to help pay for the extra costs of being disabled, whether that be, you know, taxis or transport, specific foods or mobility aids, stuff like that.
Absolutely, I use mine for a car. So
there's so many extra needs that disabled people have, and it just helps bridge that gap a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, you know, for students to be aware of.
Yeah. And access to work as well.
And access to work, absolutely. Yeah, because you don't get your disabled students allowance, obviously, once you graduate. But you will be entitled to apply for access to work, and that will help with reasonable adjustments. And hopefully your employer or your future employer would help with that. I think you can find information about access to work on the DWP website, the government website.
You also don't have to be employed yet to use access to work. It's something you could use when you're looking, or if you're struggling to find a job, that you can use it then, and they can like transition into the employer.
I didn't actually know that, so that's
really they can help you with interview costs, and they can also supply work coaches.
Can they supply interpreters and stuff as well?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
And they will quite often make quite broad, like really broad ranging suggestions. You're not ever, if they suggest 10 different things, you don't have to take them. Yeah. You can go through it. They're making suggestions of what could help based on such a breadth of knowledge. So it's, I guess, for students to know, you can look and go, oh no, that would never work for me. That would just make me feel worse. But I'd love to explore these three things.
Yeah. Definitely, it's a really useful service. Should be said, it takes an awful long time to get through the service, but that service is there, and you are entitled to use it. So, a real benefit to graduates. Is there anything else that either of you kind of would like to sort of put out there for students who are looking for work who are neurodivergent? Any other advice that you would give?
I'd like to put a word out for the University Careers Service, because I know that they have specific disability appointments where you can talk about your career in relation to your disability. I had one of those in second year, and it was really helpful. In just talking to someone, I didn't feel like I had to over-explain my disability and what I could and couldn't do because of that, and I think that really helped me. And I think just for students, think about what you're good at and try and see if there's something that you're good at, but there might be aspects of the job that aren't accessible to you. Try and think of some ways that can be accommodated so that maybe you can still do the job that you want to do. I worked in a chippy for a few weeks last year. I only lasted 3 weeks. But I asked my boss if I could have some like loop earplugs to wear while I was in there, because it was so loud, and I don't think I would have got through the 3 weeks that I did without them. And I can still hear customers. I enjoyed that bit, but there's accommodations that can help.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think it's about remembering most employers need to do quite a lot to bend towards the neurodivergent individual, and there is a lot they can do. It's also your responsibility to bend to them a little bit as well, and an employer can't do everything. An example I give quite often when I talk to clients and talk to people within the D&I space is timesheets. So at any Big Four, any law firm, anything like that, you have to do a timesheet. It's how we bill our clients, it's how we understand the amount where we're spending our time working. They are challenging for everybody, and they are
if
not.
You've got ADHD, that's impossible. I have very bad concept of time.
But we have many people working at EY who have ADHD and still do them. You can't not do them. It's not a choice. It's part of working somewhere where we do. But there are so many things you can put in place to support them, like a buddy up. You could buddy and do them together if one person is really organised and one person isn't, or you can have your manager reminding you. You could do a little bit at the end of every day. There are so many adjustments in place. So to take that, and that's why it's such a good example, that thing of I couldn't do it, you definitely could. It's that bending a little bit towards the employer, and then they will bend that way towards you.
I think that's such an important thing to remember as well, that there's going to be aspects of the job that are unavoidable, and there's aspects of the job that can be accommodated, and it's finding ways to accommodate so that you can do the job that you need to do. And again, and it might be that the way you do it doesn't quite look like the way everybody else does it, and I think it's just that sort of negotiation and that figuring out between you and the employer how to get the end result that you're both looking for.
And challenging yourself on, is it something I can't do? That needs an adjustment, or is it something I don't like doing? Because that can be really hard when you have certain ways of thinking and you have special interests, and you might be really motivated on 80% of your job. You have to find that way of getting to that 20%, and that's where your employer is there to support you and think about that adjustment.
And actually I really find that the more I'm accommodated to do the stuff that I can't do, or even accommodated stuff that I can do, but there's some accommodation issues in the way, that if I'm accommodated, the stuff that I struggle with or I don't like doing becomes so much easier, because I'm not wasting all of my energy on doing things that aren't accessible.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess the final thought from me, I'd probably add, once you get into that workplace, to look out for things like employee relation groups. Most employers now will have some kind of like staff network or commute, they call them different things, but it can be a place for someone and lots of different characteristics, but there's nearly always either a disability or a neurodiversity aspect, to come together, and then you've got a group of friends at work, you've got a group of allies and a group of people who've been through the same thing as you. So if you go to them and say, I'm really, maybe a meeting, you're like, I'm really struggling with this aspect of work, the chances that group of people in that same sphere as you will have as well.
Doesn't the university have a disabled staff
I was
network?
just going to say this, that absolutely, it's vital. You're working at the University of Manchester. We have a disabled staff network. We also have a neurodivergent staff network who are phenomenal. They are amazing. But having that group of like-minded people around you is invaluable, especially if you're new in your role and you're not sure, and you can just put a shout out to say, I've got this problem, what do I do? Somebody will know how to overcome it.
And I think even if there's not a neurodiversity one, maybe looking for other staff networks.
Yeah.
In our Manchester office, we have some amazing people running our LGBTQ network, and that's a place that loads of people come together, allies and those who identify, and are just friends and supportive and wonderful.
And actually there's quite a big overlap between neurodivergence and LGBTQ.
Yeah, there is.
As well, so you're likely to find some neurodivergent people there as well.
Perfect way to end intersectionally.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you to both of you, because this has been amazing, and I just hope it's helpful for all those graduates and students who are coming up thinking about going into the world of work who also are neurodivergent. And EY is a fantastic place to work by the sounds of it.
My dad has worked there for years now, and he loves it.
It's brilliant. I think for anyone, I certainly am very happy there.
So thank you both.
You're welcome. Thanks.